This episode of Wheat Pete's Word is brought to you by Syngenta. Harvest season is here, and your friends at Syngenta want to extend a heartfelt wish for a safe and productive harvest season. Take extra care on the public roadways. Your safety matters as much as your yield. Your family is counting on your safe return home each night.
Good day, and welcome to Wheat Pete's Word here on Real Agriculture for Wednesday, October the 8th. On this episode of The Word, safety yet again. Then competition champions. Yes. After that, Paul will hate it, but I'm going to do some updates because there's just so much going on. After that, agronomy. Lots of stuff there as well. Let's go. Oh, gosh, before I get into the safety, I just want to say I so wish, there's always so much. I never get through it all. I just wish we could all get together in a big room and you could fire questions at me and we could argue about them and discuss them and talk about the principles. Man, there's just so much fun doing this. And yes, I wish we could all get together. Virtually seems to be about the best we can do. Now I have to mention safety yet again. Please, please, please think twice. Act once. If you are hooking onto wagons, do the circle check. We had a fatality recently here in Ontario, and it was after dark, and the wagon had lights. But the operator, I'm told, I can't confirm this, but the operator just forgot to hook the lights up. And when you're tired, when you're working long hours, it's easy to make those mistakes. But oh my gosh, walk around the vehicle. For Peter now, Wheat Pete, he also checks that there is a pin between the wagons because apparently some people will steal pins. Walk around, check the pin is in, check the safety chain. I mean, it doesn't even hurt just to make sure as you're walking to look wheel lug nuts, because I had a neighbor call me up and say that they almost lost a tire going down the road. And what happened there, I don't know. But regardless, do the circle check. And the most critical component of the circle check before you drive down the road is that the lights on the back are working. Oh my gosh, it's just so important. So please, please, please. And it's not just road safety. I mean, it's all facets of agriculture. Think twice, act once. It's incredibly critical, and it will save lives. Enough of that. Congratulations go out to John and Tyler Wilkieson. They're farmers near Brantford. They had the Supreme Champion foal at the World Clydesdale Horse Show in Springfield, Illinois. I guess there's horses come from all over the globe. Congratulations. I know it has nothing to do with crop agriculture, but man, when Canadians can perform well on an international scale, we need to recognize that. So congratulations to John and Tyler. Well done. Hey, did you know that on Monday, October the 6th, it was National Nematode Day? I had no clue we had a National Nematode Day, and I wouldn't even hardly care, except that it's a great reminder to soil sample for soybean cyst nematode. It's such a problem. It is often the silent yield robber. And the perfect time to sample for soybean cyst nematode is after soybean harvest. Man, if you have any question whatsoever, even if you don't have a question, with this fall weather, oh my gosh, go take a soil sample after your soybean crop and check it out for soybean cyst nematode. All right, a really quick personal note, because I know there's a few listeners that want to know this information. Wheat Pete is back in another play. It's called Deadline. It's at Theatre Woodstock. You can Google Theatre Woodstock. We open Friday, October the 17th, and run for 2 weeks. And Wheat Pete plays a crusty old curmudgeon. It's kind of a fun role to play, that's for sure. Let's move on. And it is just such a dichotomy this year from a yield perspective. We talked about this lots, but wow. Frank Rodney saying we have record crops. Jack out of Alberta on the Agronomist Monday night said that Alberta is just like Ontario, that they have some areas in Alberta where the yields are coming off and the yield in bushels per acre is a single digit. And yet you go to different part of Alberta where they've had rain and they have record crops. Here in Ontario, the beans have been coming out of the field unbelievably dry. Sometimes 8% moisture. And even with those low moistures, the odd grower is saying, well, the moisture is low, but it's still a higher number than my yield in bushels per acre. And that is just nasty. Mark saying that the high yields in his fields are struggling to hit 20 bushel per acre on the yield monitor. Warren saying, man, yeah, the yields are awful. The upside is we're only using 40% of the fuel in the combine, and we're combining 10 acres an hour more than we generally do. And I'm just going like, wow, Warren, it's such a difference in scale, because Wheat Pete's combine never hits 10 acres an hour, and you're doing 10 acres an hour more just because the bean yields are that low. In any case, it is just one of those years. Nothing anyone can do from that perspective. It's all about rainfall. And where there is rain, the volunteer beans. So Jim sending me a text saying, oh my gosh, and Jim is near Stratford. Stratford has gotten rainfall, and yes, in that part of the world, the volunteer beans, after bean harvest, have started to grow, and those fields are just turning green. You go, what was wrong with my combine operator? Or if you're the combine operator, what was wrong with my combine? No, it's just another factor of dry weather. Two things going on. Number one, when the beans are at 10% moisture or less, you get more pod shatter before it gets into the combine header. Every combine's a little different, but that's just a fact of what happens. And the other thing that is going on is that when it's really dry, you get shorter internodes. When you get shorter internodes, you get more pods close to the ground. And try as we might, some of those pods get cut in half by the knife, the ones that are right down at the lowest nodes. In some cases, the pods are touching the ground. You can't tip the knife enough to get under those pods. You clip them open, they drop in the ground, they're going to grow. That's just life. By the way, there is some concept about, splitting beans, and we have, after the rain, we got a rain 2 weekends ago. We re-wet the beans. We said, good. We got out there. We got some beans off at 13% moisture, 14% moisture, kind of in the sweet spot. And 2 days later, it was super dry again. But in many cases, boy, beans that were ready and we didn't get out of the field before the rain, and we thought the rain did us a favor. Yeah, those seed coats became very fragile, and in the combine process, we just split a lot more beans open than they wanted to. Not really a big deal when we're talking about crushed soybeans, but a very big deal when we're talking about IP soybeans. However, any split beans that go at the back of the combine, they are not going to grow. So it's not the splits. It's just the shatter loss. It's the header cutting those beans off. That's what's causing those volunteer beans out in the soybean fields. The upside is that if they get a bit of growth, they'll cycle a bit of nitrogen back to the next crop. They're not 100% bad from that standpoint. The yield loss is 100% bad. And we are at corn harvest. Now, here's what's really interesting, is that the whole combine procedure this fall, whether you're combining canola in Western Canada with powdery mildew, my disease experts have said, Peter, you talked about downy mildew. Most of it is actually powdery mildew. Not that there's a big difference, but let's be accurate. Okay, powdery mildew, canola in Western Canada, just a dust cloud. come to Ontario and soybean harvest and just a dust cloud. And it's not because of mildew, but it's because of alternaria. And what's really interesting is that in many of the droughted corn crops, the plants are totally dead and the combine is a dust cloud. Greg Stewart, my great friend, out doing some plot assessments in a cornfield, and he said never in his life has he walked out of a cornfield close to harvest or just ready to be harvested and felt like, I just want to go home and shower because I'm black. And there was a bit of smut in that field. That's part of it, but most of it was because of alternaria. Remember, alternaria in field crops is not a yield-limiting disease. It is in some other crops, but in corn and soybeans and wheat, alternaria is not a yield-limiting disease. It is a secondary saprophyte. It comes in on dead or dying tissue, and the weather conditions we have had this fall have been perfect for alternaria. Alternaria likes 25 to 28 degrees Celsius and 85% relative humidity. We haven't had any rain, but we have had lots of heavy dews overnight and dews that hang around in the morning. In fact, some growers combining soybeans from 9 in the morning till noon when the dew was on and that moisture was up a little bit. Well, that is alternaria weather. Does it have a big impact? The answer is no, but it does create the dust clouds, and the dust clouds do two things. One, keep your cab air filter clean, because breathing that dust in is an absolute human health hazard. And number two, that dust becomes a fire hazard with the corn crop, with the soybean crop. I mean, normally we talk about fire hazard in the summertime when we're combining wheat because temperature and all the chaff from the wheat crop. This soybean harvest, there's been combine fires. In fact, 5 different combine fires down in the deep southwest of Ontario that in soybean harvest, quite rare. If it stays dry, we get at the corn crop, fire hazard on the corn crop is going to be an issue as well, not something we're used to. So pay attention, keep the combine blowing off, keep the cab air filter clean. It's just one of those things we're going to have to start to do. The other thing about this dry weather continuing is that there's some weird things going on out in the corn crop. We're hitting corn harvest, but we talk about black layer. In many instances, in the really droughted areas, the corn is not black layering. It simply has no moisture. It's run out of moisture. It would typically translocate out of the stalk to the cob to make that finish, and it can't do that, so we are getting brown layer. We are getting corn that is 28% moisture, and the very tip of it is still almost a little wet and mushy because it just never managed to translocate that out. We are also seeing lodging. We've talked about that, and weak shank. So if you're out scouting your corn, do the push test for lodging, but in those droughted areas, just watch, because some hybrids, you touch the cob, they are dropping on the ground very, very easily. A bunch of reasons to get out there and get that corn crop harvested as quickly as we can. All right, let's move on and get into the agronomy answers part. So first off, Bobby's saying, oh, my wheat crop is just so variable. How long will wheat seed live in dry soil? So the answer to that is if the wheat seed is actually in dust, so if you're like Brad and you planted 315 acres of wheat and the very first field you got planted, that particular farm, that 60 acres got an inch of rain that didn't happen on any of your other farms, man, so you have 60 acres of wheat that looks perfect. And where we have gotten moisture with the weather conditions we've had in Ontario, the beautiful sunshine, the warm temperatures, wheat has been emerging in 5 days and looks probably the best it has looked for October the 8th in Ontario in a decade or longer. So that's awesome. However, the other fields that Brad has, that wheat is in dry soil. If it's actually in dust, it will wait for rain for almost ever. No diseases like that dry condition for the most part. If you have insects, maybe, but here it's going to wait a long time, Bobby. The real challenge is if you're close, and this is the problem in variable fields. So some of it made it to moisture, some of it didn't made it to moisture but ran out of moisture. The stuff that germinated and now is in dry soil, if it doesn't get a rain within 2 weeks, it may be in trouble. So we'll just have to wait and see. Wheat is pretty resilient. It'll take a lot, but yes, wheat in dry soil that has germinated, it won't last forever. Just like soybeans in the spring, wheat takes a lot less moisture than soybeans, but it still won't last forever. Trevor sending me some pictures saying, Peter, I've got calcium deficiency in my emerging wheat. I have twisted leaves, and that's a sign of calcium deficiency. I love the fact that Trevor is out there and being that invested in his wheat field and scouting it that closely. That's awesome. But cereals, when they emerge, all cereals have a twist to the leaf. So you're correct that if you had bigger wheat that wasn't just at the 3-leaf stage and you saw twisted leaves, you might say that is some calcium deficiency. But when cereals first emerge, and it's a really interesting piece of trivia that doesn't matter at all, but when cereals first come out of the ground, all cereals except the oat crop, the leaves twist clockwise. You can actually determine if you have oat and barley planted together and it's not big enough to see which one has ligules, because barley has big ligules that clasp the stem. Oat has no ligules. Oat starts with a 0. That means 0 ligules. But at the early growth stages, they haven't developed far enough to see that. It's cool because you look at the barley plants, those leaves twist clockwise. You look at the oat plants, those leaves twist counterclockwise. But all cereal crops, as they emerge, those first few leaves do have a twist. It's not calcium deficiency. It's simply the way that the crop grows. Len sending me a picture of some second growth barley. He took barley off as a forage crop. And of course, some of the late tillers then get released, and that barley is now in the dough stage. He's saying, will that barley germinate next year? And the answer is absolutely possible if it gets mature. In fact, sometimes we grow winter wheat after barley, and we will see barley in the next winter wheat crop. So if those seeds get to be mature, they definitely could germinate next year. A lot of them will be eaten by rodents, and a lot of them will also just rot over the winter, but a few will survive, and you could see some volunteer barley next year. Curtis asking, okay, manure on triticale. The triticale is emerged. Can we put manure on that triticale now? Is it going to harm the crop? And the answer, always with winter cereals. The only time you cannot put manure on a winter cereal crop is just as the coleoptile is within the top inch or half inch of emergence. Because if you apply manure to a cereal crop that hasn't yet emerged, you burn the coleoptile, and then it has nothing to push through to the soil surface. And eventually it might emerge, but that first leaf is doing the emerging, and it's just the weakest looking crop that you ever saw in your life. Other than that, triticale, oftentimes triticale, we want it for a forage crop, and there's lots of research out there from New York State that says a bit of fall nitrogen on triticale actually increases the forage yield of that triticale the next spring. Not so much for winter wheat, in fact, not at all for winter wheat that we want for grain, but if we want forage, if we can stimulate it to produce a few more tillers, those tillers are a bit more robust, we can increase the forage yield. So manure on triticale in the fall, absolutely fine. Really try not to go a lot over 50 or 60 pounds of actual nitrogen, because with cereal crops, if you pound on too much nitrogen, you can sometimes prevent them from hardening off, from going into that winter hardy state. So there's a limit. But manure on triticale is fine. Andrew sending me a picture of purple triticale saying, man, what's going on? The triticale is emerging purple. And I put on 5,500 gallons of dairy manure before we planted the triticale. What's the matter? It's just triticale. Some genetics just do that. There's nothing really wrong with that. It's not what you want to see, but if they stay purple, we'll have to investigate further. Remember that when they're first emerging, they are 100% reliant on seed reserves. And so if they're short phosphorus, if that's the problem, it's not the applied phosphorus they're short of. It would be actually the seed phosphorus that they were short of. That's possible, but extremely rare. I doubt that's the issue. It's just a genetic thing. If they get to the three-leaf stage with any crop, by the time they hit the three-leaf stage, they've moved away from the seed reserves, and now they're relying on soil uptake. So that's when you can start to say, okay, what did I do wrong from a management standpoint? When they first emerge, if they're purple, it's genetic, just either that or it's a weather stress, right? The weather has turned cold at night. They've got a cold night. That can cause purpling as well. All right, I want to finish up here with a great question that the caller left. I'm not sure, no name attached, but that's fine. And his question was this: what do I trust the most? A soil test, a crop test, or a manure test? And so he gave me great detail, and this is awesome, but I'll distill it down to this. So his crop took 47 pounds of phosphorus out. He put 81 pounds of phosphorus on that crop, and the soil test went up 1 part per million. In a different field, the crop took 66 pounds of phosphorus out. He put 93 pounds of phosphorus on, and the soil test dropped 20 parts per million. So he tested the crop, so that's the removal numbers, or at least he's using some removal chart to get the removal. He tested the manure, and no fertilizer applied, it's just manure, and he has the soil test, and he's saying, which one of those three do I rely on? So my first note is, so with phosphorus, just verify that we're talking apples to apples. Make sure that the manure test is in P2O5 equivalent and is not giving you actual phosphorus, because when we talk about removal and application, and make sure that the crop removal number is also the same. And that's one of the challenges. When we talk fertilizer, we talk P2O5. Oftentimes, when we analyze the grain, we talk actual phosphorus, and the conversion is, if you are using P2O5 to get to actual phosphorus, you divide your P2O5 number by 2.29. And I know that's a little confusing, but we just need to make sure that we're talking apples to apples. Now, in terms of what do we trust the most, the soil test, the crop test, or the manure test? And the answer is we trust all three, but we take all three with a grain of salt. The soil test, we take a soil sample out of 2 million pounds per acre in that top 6 inches, and we take one soil sample over, who knows, everyone's different, but if you take that over a 10-acre period, or rather area, and we take a cup full of soil, like a pound of soil out of 20 million pounds, and then when we send it to the lab, they mix that up and they take a thimbleful. So do we trust the soil test? Yes, because soil test works. But can we get some variability in the results? The answer there is absolutely yes as well. So you have to trend those soil tests over time, and in doing what you're doing, looking at this, one specific test on one specific year, that can be a bit misleading, and that's why you get an increase of 1 part per million in one field, which is actually pretty accurate. 47 out, 87 in. It takes 35 pounds of applied P2O5 to raise the soil test 1 part per million. 47 plus 35 is getting very, very close to 81. So for that field to increase 1 part per million is sort of what we would expect. But where you removed 66, applied 93, you should have also gotten that test to go up 1 part per million. For it to drop 20 parts per million, what's wrong there? Nothing's really wrong. It's just, is there a sample issue? Did we sample the manure inappropriately? Did we sample the soil inappropriately? It's unlikely that that field could ever drop 20 parts per million, even if we applied nothing. So you just have to take that and look at it over time. It's a bit of a long explanation, but I think we have to keep that thought process in perspective. And with that, oh, what a long episode. That's it. That's all. On behalf of the team here at Real Agriculture, this is Wheat Pete with the word for Wednesday, October the 8th. Keep the questions coming. Keep the plot results coming. I'll talk more about plot results next week. And this is my big meeting room. So thank you all for joining. I just wish it could be a little bit more interactive through the discussion. Talk to you next week.
Thank you for downloading this episode of Wheat Pete's Word, brought to you by Syngenta. Remember to take those extra moments for safety checks, adequate rest, and staying alert in the field this harvest season. Your team at Syngenta wants you to remember that your most valuable crop is you.